Well, good afternoon, everybody. This is Brian Russell. I'm your PMI Western Idaho Chapter Lunch and Learn Coordinator. Welcome to our May 2024 session. Um, Today, we're going to hear from Rachel. Rachel Collins. Rachel is an Agile and PMO solution leader for Apex Systems. You know, a firm that many of us partner with. So welcome, Rachel. Rachel's going to talk to us today about artificial intelligence insights for project managers staying relevant during evolving ways of working. A couple of the key learning outcomes that you'll achieve today and your attendance would be become knowledgeable of the relevant types of AI, learn about the benefits of AI and practical applications. And the third one, discover key skills needed for successful delivery of AI projects. As usual with our Lunch and Learn, you can earn participation in this session. As usual as well, after the meeting, we'll be sharing the materials that you're going to see today. So what's your email for that? For members today. Take it from here.
Well, thank you so much, Brian, for that introduction, and thank you for having me as a guest speaker today. I was experiencing some challenges with your audio, Brian, but I'm not sure if it was on my end. So if anyone is experiencing audio challenges, just please put something in the chat, and we've got folks who can possibly help on the back end. But yes, as Brian mentioned, I'm a solution leader with Apex Systems. And in my role, what I do is I combine my expertise working in various project management frameworks across multiple industries and clients with the talent that Apex Systems provides from its consulting practice to design custom solutions for our clients that are specifically designed to meet their objectives and increase efficiency, deliver value, and ultimately affect change across their organizations. But I'm also a practitioner, and as a project management professional, I have started to encounter a lot of reactions to the onset of artificial intelligence in the workplace. Anything from excitement to fear. What does this mean for me? Will my role be impacted? Will I still have a job? And so to build upon the excitement, but also hopefully to assuage some of that fear, I endeavored down this path of personal research to prove how we as project management professionals can remain relevant in this evolving environment. And so with that, what can you expect from today? Well, first and foremost, I do not claim to be an expert in AI, but I do think it's imperative that we can at least ground ourselves in some definitions, and then we can dive into the impacts of this evolving technology, and finally, discuss how we can embrace it and thrive. So with that, let's jump in. As promised, let's start with some definitions. So high level, what is AI, artificial intelligence? It's really using machines to mimic human functions. So a lot of us have probably started to experience this, whether in our personal or professional lives. Maybe you've experimented a little bit with many of the different tools that are out there now. But what I'm going to quickly run through with you is a list of different types of AI technology, a quick description, and an example, just so that we can understand how these might be relevant to both our personal and professional lives. So starting with machine learning, really what that refers to is the computers are recognizing patterns, and then through an algorithm, they're able to enhance performance. It's really the basis of a lot of the tools that we interact with today. And one application of this that you might see in your day-to-day life is recommendations. So when you're shopping online and suddenly you see targeted recommendations for something that this website thinks you might enjoy, a lot of that is driven through machine learning. The next one is deep learning or neural networks. And really, this is when there are multiple interconnected nodes that can do more statistical type of representation and analysis of what's going on in the background. And so a great example of this is facial recognition. A lot of us have this on our smartphones nowadays. All of that is powered through deep learning or neural networks. The next one is large language models, and I think this is probably what many of us are familiar with. When I say GPT-3 or ChatGPT, it was built on a large language model. So it's taking a ton of data and being able to process that and understand human language. And so this is really what's being used when we execute upon the next one, which is natural language processing. So large language models feed into natural language processing, which is, of course, the chatbots that we're used to interacting with. And these processing tools can actually analyze what we're saying. They can tell us a tone of voice that's being used. They can also help with translations. They can help with, let's say, grammatical corrections, all those sorts of things that come into play when we're dealing with language. And then finally, generative AI, which is the hottest thing on the block right now. This is really original content. So it's in the name itself, generative. It's creating original content. So if you're seeing, for example, some of those holograms, or you're starting to hear about deep fakes, or just original images that were generated by AI, this is what generative AI can do. Hopefully, this is a good enough high-level overview of some of the different technologies. As I've mentioned, I am no expert, but it certainly helps to understand what's out there and then how we might be able to leverage these in either our personal or professional lives.
Absolutely, Rachel. Thank you for sharing the differences here. And
Yeah.
it's interesting as you've brought these up and the examples, just in day-to-day life, whether you're making like a hotel reservation and you have a chatbot pop up to help you out, um, how prevalent these are now in our day-to-day life. And at least for me, sometimes I just take it for granted of how far the technology has come. Thank you for sharing the content here.
You're very welcome. All right, but now let's really talk about, well, what does all this mean for us especially in our professional lives? I wanted to start by giving you an overview of a study that PMI conducted back in 2019. And although that is now almost 4 years old, I do think some of the insights that were generated are pretty relevant even today. And so in this study, it was the Pulse of the Profession report. What they did was they surveyed 551 project management professionals across a range of industries around the globe. And what they asked of these folks was to really rate their organizations in 5 key principles and how well their organizations followed these principles as it relates to their investment in AI. And so those 5 key principles that were considered were encouraging an open and welcoming mindset around artificial intelligence, promoting experimentation, leadership, so truly driving, utilizing this technology, the data strategy, and overall skills cultivation. So again, those 5 principles are what these individuals were asked to rate in terms of their organization's investments in AI. And what they found was that there were clear groupings in terms of organizations that were following all 5 of these principles, and those were tagged as the innovators, and other organizations that were following none of them, and those are considered the laggards. Of course, there's then everybody in between, right? So interestingly, 25% of respondents rated their organizations as innovators, and 23% rated their organizations as laggards. Again, everybody else fell somewhere in the spectrum of maybe adopting maybe 3 or 4 of the principles, but not all of them. But I think really key outcome from this study was that the AI innovators reported that they delivered 61% of their projects on time versus 47% for the AI laggards. So, in summary, what that means is the organizations that were really investing in AI were more likely to deliver their projects according to schedule. Then, if we look at the business benefits realized, this is where we see the greatest dramatic change between those innovators and laggards. So, those that were classified as innovators, they reported that 69% of their projects realized 95% or more of the business benefits. So as we know, when we set out to launch a new project, we're often tasked with quantifying the business value and what outcome or ROI are we going to get from this project. And very frequently, we don't get 100%. But for 69% of projects to actually achieve 95% of the benefits, I think that's huge, especially when compared to 53% of projects realizing any benefits from the AI laggards. So dramatic difference there. And then lastly, ROI is, of course, a benefit or an outcome, but there are other outcomes as well. So if we break out ROI as its own specific metric that we're looking at, the innovators reported 64% of their projects met or exceeded their original ROI estimates versus 52% of projects for the AI laggards. So I know that's a lot to take in, but this is from, again, a published PMI study, and we're going to send out the sources and all of the resources that were used to put together this data. So if you're interested, you can certainly read more. And it would be really interesting, too, to see if they repeated this study, what those results would be today. So with this, I think we have a poll that is related to this slide. I don't know if that's up and running.
It is, yes. So, hey, look under the session tab under the polls, scroll all the way to the bottom. You'll see poll number 1. Do you feel your organization would be considered an innovator or a laggard as it relates to prioritizing the AI investments? Take a look at that poll, and you have 3 choices to choose from. So we'll give you all just a bit to make your choice there, and then submit your response.
Right, I'm not sure everybody sees the whole list of polls, but the poll number 1 has been published.
Excellent. And just to remind you, the innovators and those principles that were used were encouraging an AI mindset, promoting experimentation, leadership, data strategy, and skills cultivation. So do you feel that your organization, based on those principles, would be considered an innovator, a laggard, or somewhere in between?
And Rachel, are you seeing the poll results as well?
I don't think I do. Maybe I have to click show results.
Yeah, I can read them to you as well.
Okay.
Looks like we've gotten in about 34 votes so far. All right. So almost evenly split. So innovators, about 27%. Laggards, 33%. And then somewhere in between, about 39%.
It's really interesting because that's almost aligned to the distribution from the responses of this study. If you remember, it was 25% responded that their organizations were innovators, but we had fewer laggards, so 23% responded that their orgs were laggards. So it seems in our group, we feel that we might have more laggards than the study group
A few.
did. Yeah.
Yep.
and then a big chunk somewhere in between. Very interesting.
Yeah.
All right. Well, great. Let's keep
Thank you all.
moving on. Thank you. Let's talk about now, how can we apply AI to our project management work? So we've got a lot of ideas here, some things that we can talk through, ways that you can use it. I'll quickly read through each one. I'd love to hear about how you might think that you could use any of these. You can put them in the chat as well. And we also do have a poll that I know George will be able to turn on momentarily. But when we think about ways that we can leverage AI in our day-to-day professional lives, these are just some ideas. And I've cited some sources too that have given some of this inspiration, but you could use it for risk prediction and proactive risk management. So by feeding it a lot of data about perhaps what happens in a typical project as you have to maybe reset your baselines, or as budget controls have to come into place, over time, what risks could AI potentially predict for you, or at least give you mitigation strategies based on that historical data? Very similarly, predictive analytics and forecasting. So not only for risk, but also, of course, for budgeting or even for performance, realizing business benefits. Do we think that we're going to actually achieve the value that we've hypothesized based on historical data? You could also potentially use it to start automating some routine tasks. I know, for example, Microsoft Copilot is out there now. That's a great tool that you can use to start automating some of your work. Those things that you do pretty frequently and regularly, why not let AI handle that for you so that you don't have to think about it? At the portfolio level, perhaps AI could help you with your project selection or your intake process. Which projects should the portfolio invest in? Again, based on historical data and performance, these projects are potentially more likely to deliver. Dependency identification and optimization. So what are the typical links that we see, those dependencies between project tasks? And how can we even minimize some of those? What might we be able to do to rework our schedule or our resourcing plan? We could use it to get real-time insights and recommendations. So as we're moving through the project, it could be helping us keep an eye on our budgets and on our schedules. What are some things that we could potentially rework so that we don't need to worry about cost overruns? It can help us with scenario analysis. So this also kind of related to that predictive analytics. Could we potentially consider what would happen if this outcome were to occur, or this risk were to occur? What would be the impact to our project plan? It can help us score and rank different projects within the portfolio. So very similar to that selection criteria. Now let's talk about which one is prioritized or ranked higher and that we should do first, for example. Workflow management. So think about things like, gosh, how many times do we have to send documents through some sort of approval routing or some sort of revision and document control? Maybe there's a way that AI could help us with that workflow so that a human doesn't have to manage it so intensely. And then lastly, dynamic resource allocation. So let's say somebody finishes up their task well before we expected. Well, let's not just let them sit idle. Maybe we can find something else for them to do. So this is just a whole host of ideas. And now I'm going to take a look at the poll. Let's see what we've got here.
Yeah, so we ready for poll number 2?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, everybody take a look at the poll number 2. Which of these applications use cases do you think would be most beneficial to you in your current role? Make your selection and then hit submit.
Good, I'm starting to see some votes in already. There's a lot to choose from, and I know you can only choose one, but based on this list, what do you think would be most beneficial to you today? I see a lot for automating routine tasks. Very
All
good.
right. Yeah, looks like that one and the intelligent workflow management.
Very cool. Yeah. I think those for me would be most relevant and save me the most time as well. And hopefully easiest to implement. Nice. Okay, we'll keep going. Now I want to talk about, we talked about how we could potentially use it, but let's talk about what's actually happening. So another PMI study, this one actually very recently released just this year through the Sweden chapter of PMI, but they did conduct this as a global study. And they broke down the top 3 areas that are most impacted by AI. So areas of project management work where AI can bring some efficiency, some benefit, value, etc. And those 3 were in data collection and reporting, performance monitoring, and project time management and scheduling. Frankly, I'm not surprised by any of these. Curious if anyone on this call would be, and you can put any of your thoughts in the chat. But then let's look at where are the areas with a low impact from AI. So these are perhaps functions where maybe people haven't started using AI yet, or we can't really find a good use case or value. And I think this one, if we really pause, I can see why. So stakeholder management, project communication, those ones actually don't surprise me at all. Project budgeting, I am a little bit surprised, but I think that might be one where we just haven't really figured out the best way to use it. But curious if anyone might agree or disagree on why AI maybe doesn't have a great impact on things like stakeholder management and project communication.
Yeah, and you can add your comments as well to the Q&A under the session. Hey, so Rachel, as I look at the low impact areas, I think of those areas, specifically the first 2, as very focused on personal interaction, people to people interaction that, frankly, AI, it's going to be a challenge for an AI tool to accomplish because it's really about me talking with you.
Totally agree. Yeah, it's that human element, that personal aspect of it.
How about the project budgeting piece? That seems unusual. Is it
Yes.
more around just managing the numbers, if you will?
Well, I'm curious about that one too, and unfortunately, the study didn't give a whole lot of detail as to why not. But my inference from this is that we potentially haven't found a great way to leverage the tools yet to budget and allocate for different projects. But I wouldn't be surprised if that changes.
Okay. And we did have in the chat, we had Maggie and Rick and David had responded similarly about the communication, and you can see their comments there.
Absolutely.
It's about the people. And the emotional intelligence, I see a comment there as well. That's so true.
Yes, I agree with all of these comments. And while AI can help us craft communications, there's certainly that human element that we need to consider. I've used it myself to refine drafts of emails that I'd like to send or even conversations that I'd like to have. But what I've noticed is that it tends to sound almost, I hate to say, robotic, too polished, too perfect. And I would like, when I'm communicating with people, for it to really feel like it's coming from me. And so AI can't do that, not yet, as Jaime said, but maybe one day in the future we'll have to watch out for that.
All right, good stuff.
Yeah. All right, so now I wanted to give everyone a real life example of how we could leverage AI in a very real practical example of our work day to day, creating a work breakdown structure. I know that this is something that as project management professionals, many of us can struggle with, and oftentimes it's because it's difficult for our stakeholders to think about the work in this way. But here's what we did. I took this prompt that's up here in gray, And I fed it into, I'm going to show everything. It was Google Bard at the time. They've rebranded and now it's Gemini. But when I used the tool, it was known as Bard. And here's what I asked it to do. I said, create a project schedule and work breakdown structure for a project encompassing a global rollout of a new ERP system for 5 regions following the PMBOK methodology, starting the second week of May 2024 and to be finished a year later. So notice, first of all, that prompt gives a lot of specific criteria. And I can't stress enough, there's lots of things out there on prompt engineering. When you're asking AI a question, the more specific you can be, the better the results that you will get. So I knew exactly what I wanted it to do for me, and I told it how long the project is going to last. I told it what methodology I'm using and the context of the project itself, the ERP rollout. And what it did for me was not develop this org chart looking thing. I made that because right now AI is pretty text-based. Yes, there are image generators, but those actually don't work very well with text just yet. But it did give me this work breakdown structure in a text and bulleted form, which I was then able to transform into a visual. And the purpose of me showing you this is not to have you look at each and everything that it suggested, but when it spit that out, I read it through it and I thought, okay, if I were actually doing this type of project, this seems like a really good place to start from. It's a draft. And now I could use this with my stakeholders and say, okay, what's missing? Or what do we need to change? At least when you put something in front of people to give them something to react to, I think you're more likely to make progress faster than starting with a blank slate. So I thought this was really impactful. Maybe you can use this idea too. It did give me a basic schedule as well to be able to complete within a year. I just didn't find that as important to showcase for you here.
Okay.
But one other thing, oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. Isn't the schedule piece of it? But this is, I know the content here was an eye chart,
Yes.
but yeah, just very relevant as you think about the activities that occur in a project.
Absolutely.
Impressive of what Google came back with.
Yeah, that it knew enough to give me all this. So related to that schedule input, though, it did give me a schedule, and I also thought that that was a good starting point. But remember, I asked it to follow PMBOK methodology. After that, I also asked it, now give me a schedule following an Agile methodology. And it couldn't do it. And I'm curious if anyone might have any ideas as to why.
Yeah, for the audience, has anyone tried? Well, Cheryl says Agile is not predictive. Maybe that's why.
Yeah, you're right on the money, Cheryl.
Yes.
So because Agile is really based in incremental delivery and short planning, short delivery sprints sometimes, it basically came back with a response to me that said, here's what your sprint schedule could look like if you were using Scrum, but note that you would most likely need to adjust this every 2 weeks because plans change. And so I actually loved that response from the tool. That was pretty cool.
Yeah, that's real life for sure.
Yeah. Well, hopefully this gave everyone an idea of how you could actually put it to use that maybe you haven't thought about before. Okay, I'm going to keep moving. So next, what I want to give you is some trends and predictions. So more research, more things that I've discovered as I was going down this path. So Gartner in 2019, again, almost 4 years old, predicted that 80% of project managers' effort could be eliminated by 2030 due to AI taking on traditional PM functions. Now, I don't know about you, but at first glance, reading that prediction might cause your heart to skip a beat for a second because you might think, oh no, what about my job? What about my role? What does this mean for me? But I'm here to tell you, never fear, because it doesn't mean that our jobs are going away. It does, however, mean that we can become much more efficient and start to think about how we are bringing value to our organizations in perhaps a different way than we have previously. So to help explain,
Yep.
let me keep going.
Yeah, so true. So true with that, Rachel, that I would think it would help us move away from the more of the administrative task in the project management role
Yep.
to more of the higher level tasks like engagement with your team members, engagement with your stakeholders.
Absolutely. So much of what we do is based on those relationships that we build throughout our organizations. We have a lot of influence. We also have a business mindset, so we know what's going to work for our customers as well as for our team members. These are things that still need our input and our leadership. So the next stat is from 2023, just last year. So PMI predicted that, or not predicted, but found that as of last year, 21% of project managers were already using AI always or often in their regular project efforts. So we have how many people in attendance right now? A little bit over 40. So I am curious if that 21% number based on our audience would be higher or lower. I don't have a poll for this one, but I have a feeling that even though this was maybe a year ago, that 21% would be higher today.
Rachel, actually, poll number 4 asks that question specifically.
Oh, okay.
So
We'll
I can
save
publish
it.
that.
We'll save it for the end.
Oh,
I forgot I
okay.
had that one. Thanks, George.
Yep, you do.
All right, the next one is also in the same study, 2023 from PMI. Despite the fact that 21% of PMs were using AI, it also found that 49%, so almost half of the study's participants, lacked experience in using AI. So that's an interesting find. So, that accounts for, if we're talking about the same group of people, there's probably, a small chunk somewhere in the middle that maybe know it but don't use it often. It'd be interesting to do this study again, even in another year, and see how these have shifted. The last one, I think, to pull together the other three here is that 82% of senior leaders believed that AI would have at least some impact on their projects, which is important to consider. If we have 49% of PMs who don't have experience, and yet 82% of leaders think that it's going to have an impact, that may be a gap that we want to address. And I think that we all have it in our personal capacity to find ways to address that gap. If we are lacking experience, many of these tools are free. There are tons of tutorials out there. So go experiment, go play with them, and get ahead of that curve.
Absolutely. 82% senior leaders, I would interpret that too, are kind of expecting the use of AI impact on the projects. So
Yeah.
I think there's an expectation there from senior leaders, at least according to this survey.
Absolutely. So with all that in mind, let's talk about what are the skills that we need to be successful in an AI-driven world. So true to form here, I used AI to help me put this together. So I wanted to know, as a project manager, what skills do I need to be relevant so that I can continue to work in this profession and bring value to my organization? So what I did was I asked Google, because don't we all? I wanted to see what was out there. And Google came back with this list of, I think it's 8 sources over here on the right. That's the source key. So letters A through H. And I thought, wow, that's a lot of content. I don't really want to read through all of these articles. I don't have time. Well, AI to the rescue. So what I did was I put each of those article URLs into Bing this time. And I asked Bing, read these articles and summarize the key themes and individual skills that are mentioned are needed and relevant for project managers in this evolving workplace that's leveraging AI. And tell me how many of these sources mention these specific skills. And this is what we got. Again, it didn't format it into a table like this for me. I did that in PowerPoint, but it did give me a very easy way to visualize in a text form the theme, the skills that were mentioned in that theme, and which sources mentioned it. And then what I did is I went back and I read through these results, and I noticed there were some bullet points that didn't necessarily make sense. So I went back and I verified, I looked at these articles and I said, what is that from? What is that referring to? And what I found was, AI is not perfect, so it's going to make mistakes. It would sometimes take headings from the article and translate that as a skill set that was needed. So clearly things that just didn't make sense, I removed. And this is what I ended up with. So the message here is trust but verify. Don't just take what it spits out at you at face value. You really want to make sure that when you're using it to make your life more efficient, that you're also doing your due diligence and not just turning in a plagiarized paper, so to speak. But let's look at these themes and these skills. I think one thing that's standing out to me right off the bat is the top theme of project management and leadership. There's a lot of skills mentioned, and a lot of them really stand out as those what we would traditionally call soft skills. But I almost hate that term soft because it somewhat implies that they're not meaningful. But I think what we're starting to see again in this world of AI is that those are the skills that we all bring that actually are meaningful and set us apart and can help drive project success. So if anything, honing in on those so-called soft skills, in my opinion, is where I believe we all need to focus so that we are seen as critical to driving these outcomes. So we also have a poll for this slide too. So if George, you could publish that one now too. Which theme do you believe will be most important? So the other themes here, not surprisingly, are technical and data skills, AI tools and knowledge, and then innovation and adaptation. So if we look at all of these themes, which one do you believe will be most important for project managers in general to hone their skills in? Got some votes coming in already. I like what Foster said in the chat. Soft skills are the hard skills. I love that. Yeah, I think too often they are discounted as maybe easy, right? Or cliche, like, oh yeah, everybody can do that. But truthfully, not everyone can negotiate well. Not everyone possesses a level of emotional intelligence that enables them to feel and express empathy with the folks that they're working with. These are things that we can hone and we can refine. Even if you don't have them today, we can work on them and it will be meaningful to our organizations. So what do we've got here in our poll so far? Looks like a pretty even split across project management and leadership, AI tools and knowledge, and innovation and adaptation. And then we have all of them as a choice as well. Well, I can't say that I, disagree with any of you. I think these are all important, but what I would love for you to take away from this is that really our roles are not going to go away. And these are the skills that we can look into to continue to stay relevant in this changing world.
Yep, absolutely.
So on that point, let's look at what some of the various project management and other Agile and certifying bodies have to say about being relevant. So PMI says in 2023, we need to increase our aptitude in these power skills, which they classify, and maybe I'll use power skills instead of soft skills from now on. They classify those as communication, problem solving, collaborative leadership, and strategic thinking. I think those pretty much align to what we saw previously in the project management and leadership theme. Let's look over here to Scaled Agile Inc. If anyone's familiar with SAFe. SAFe is a very popular Agile framework that's being leveraged now across not only PMOs, but IT delivery organizations as well. So SAFe says the key success factors for us in these types of roles is we need to apply a clear decision-making framework, which of course SAFe does offer. So I think they're speaking to that a little bit. They're recommending that we organize within our organizations. So the way that we structure our organization needs to be around how do we deliver AI solutions if we want to stay ahead of the curve. We have to be able to proactively manage our data. We also have to build our organizational competencies in AI, so investing in our people, and also establish an AI solution path, which of course also relates to one of their offerings and one of their principles that they teach as well is creating those solutions to deliver value to your customers. So a little bit different than what PMI recommends. Prince 2, which is, I would say, the European counterpart to PMI, what they found was that 77% of organizations have said that they should focus on soft skills as well. So very similar to what PMI said. So communication, leadership, innovation, strategic thinking, creativity, and emotional intelligence. And then lastly, this one from, well, not lastly, we got Cognilytica too, but Agile Alliance. This one I found very interesting. They ran an experiment and they published it as a white paper back in 2018, and they called it the Virtual Scrum Master Experiment. And really what they did was they replaced a human acting in the Scrum Master role with an AI chatbot and an AI tool that would help automate a lot of the tasks that the Scrum Master would typically do and that the development team would interact with. So on the plus side, what this experiment found was that 30 to 40% of tasks around Agile ceremonies could be automated. Cool, great. However, the people, the developers that were on that Agile team that now had to interact with that virtual Scrum Master hated it. They said there was no empathy, no emotional intelligence. It was very difficult to express what was happening and really get that help that a Scrum Master would typically provide. Because we think about, Scrum Masters, one of the primary roles they play is helping the team to remove impediments. And how can a chatbot do that for you? And so I think that this experiment really reinforced the Agile principle of individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And then last but not least, Cognilytica, newer to the playing field. So they have actually come out with their own new certification specific to how to manage AI projects. And it's called the CPM AI certification. And they claim it's the fastest growing cert for people who are managing AI specific projects with an annual growth rate of 220%. This was back in 2022. And they say that to stay relevant, applying the AI-specific project methodology is crucial. So I will tell you that I looked into this. I don't have the certification myself, but they do build heavily upon the PMI and PMBOK methodology. as well as other popular data science methodologies that have been around since the 80s. So I wouldn't say that it's any completely new way of thinking, but it's definitely bringing some older methodologies back to the forefront. Does anyone have this certification? I think we have a poll around this one as well. Or have you heard of this cert? Or maybe are you considering this, or maybe any other certification too? I think we can publish that.
Yeah, take a look at poll number 6. And it's interesting, Rachel. Here at Blue Cross of Idaho, we are currently going through the scaled Agile framework, including certifications for many of our team members.
Very interesting. All right, I see some results coming in. Looks like no one's taken this yet. And I see a chat does PMI offer CPMAI? No. So CPMAI is offered through an organization called Cognilytica. So they are not affiliated, and while they are building upon the PMBOK methodology, it is not associated with PMI. PMI does have several courses out there now where you can get certified in different forms and fashions of AI. And I've actually got a resources slide. So I think I'll just go right to that so that you can see. You'll all be getting a copy of these slides. And over here on the left-hand side under the PMI column, gosh, wow, look at this. There are so many resources out there. Most of them are free or accessible with your PMI membership. So everything from an exam simulator that's built on AI to different courses, articles, videos. So check all of this out. It's really good stuff. And then on the other side, here's a lot of other references and just links to things that I've referenced today throughout this discussion if you're curious in learning more. So I've got the Cognilytica link. The AI Today podcast is actually run by Cognilytica, so you could check that out as well. And last but not least, I've got some links if you're curious in learning more about Apex systems. I've got our homepage, and then links to our solution-specific pages in AI, Agile, and portfolio and project management.
And I see that Cheryl has shared another link in the chat. PMI offers a digital badge in AI learning. So yeah, good to know.
Very good. Yes, that one's included right here as well. So now you've got it more easily accessible. You can click that link in the chat. And then we've got one last poll. So how many, or are you using AI to perform project management tasks today? I'll publish it. Here we go.
It's coming through here in just a minute.
Okay.
Nope.
It'll be poll number 3.
Poll number 4.
Poll number 4. Thanks, George.
Rachel, while we're waiting on this one, you got me thinking about something that I've seen over the years. I'm not sure how many are still familiar with Conway's Law. But he was a system analyst and programmer back in the 60s and came up with what's called Conway's Law. There's organizations that design systems are constrained to produce designs that are a copy of the communications within the organization. And his example at that time was if you've got 3 project teams working on a compiler, you're going to have a 3-pass compiler. And I've seen that over and over again as putting project teams together and structures within an organization, that the final product really does mirror how the project itself is structured. And I'm wondering what AI is going to do to that and how that's going to affect our project structures and the communication paths within the projects. It'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah. Good stuff.
We had some of the participants that voted that they use AI to perform project management tasks all the time. And I'd be curious if you'd put something in chat. I'm just kind of curious just around what aspect of the project are you using AI, at least in your experience. So if any of you that answered that way on the poll, if you wanted to put something in chat, I'd be curious to see just kind of what it looks like. While that's going on too, Rachel, you had talked earlier about the PMI pulse of the profession.
Yes.
That was one of your sources on one of the first slides. I'm just going to tout that they recently put out the most recent version of the Pulse of the Profession, which you can get at pmi.org. And some interesting content in there. It's worth a look if you have not already looked at it. Just kind of see what our peers are thinking about globally, given that it's a survey that is surveyed around the globe.
This might be, I think this is the link that is here. So Artificial Intelligence and Project Management, a global chapter-led survey. It wasn't called Pulse of the Profession, though. Is there a new, I didn't see the new Pulse of the Profession.
There was one that came out earlier this year.
I will go look for that.
Yeah.
I wish I had that in here, but we do have this. This is the most recent one, this global chapter-led survey. This is the Sweden study that I referred to as well.
Okay. Had a couple of responses. If you see in the chat there about current use of AI, you can see a couple people responded.
Oh, interesting. So schedules, communication plans, research, change management plans, other advanced scheduling, all good stuff. And then the next one, Perplexity AI. I haven't heard of that before, but this is interesting. SWOT analysis drafts. Oh, that's a cool idea. Kind of reminds me of the work breakdown structure where, hey, you put a draft together and put it in front of your stakeholders and give them something to react to. Just get you started.
Yep.
Very good. Perplexity gives citations. Awesome. Okay. Well, I hope that everyone took away something today, whether it's reassurance that your job isn't going away, or ideas on how you could potentially use AI to help you be more efficient, or maybe some new research or resources that you want to check out. So we will be sharing out these slides, and you'll have them, and you'll have my contact information as well. I really want to thank you for having me once again, and thank you for the interaction through the chat and through the polls. This was great. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Any last questions or comments? So great job, Rachel. Thank you. Interesting. Yeah. Thank you. And it was an interesting discussion. And as I mentioned earlier, we'll be sharing out this content to those that have registered for the class. Watch for an email from the PMI, from the chapter's email with the slides that Rachel shared. And then looking forward to seeing many, if not all of you, next month. We're going to have Mr. David Barrett join us from Project Bytes next month. So stay tuned for that on the second Wednesday of June. Thanks again, Rachel. Take care. Have a great rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone.
See everybody.
Bye-bye.